How does spending more money get you better performance in loudspeakers? That's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. Hey folks, I'm Gene Delasallo with Audioholics. We got James Larson in the house. We're going to be talking about a case study that he did on good, better, best bookshelf loudspeakers. What do you get when you spend more money? Why do higher performance speakers cost more money? We're going to be kind of going over the rundown of that with James. How you doing, my friend?
I'm good.
Awesome. So you put together a slide presentation. You got 3 loudspeakers here. But guys, I want to remind you on April 18th, we are doing our 25th anniversary celebration online at 7 p.m. Eastern time. I'm going to put a link below so you guys can register because we're going to give away a bunch of prizes that we have sponsored from many of the partners we work with. You're going to want to be there. We're going to try to get as many Audioholics on here as possible. We're going to get some guests on here. Again, that's on April 18th. At 7 p.m. So without further ado, let us break into the slide presentation that you put together, James, and you call it loudspeaker quality scaling by price increase. It's not very catchy, but
yeah. Yeah, so what we did, so recently, I mean, in addition to the new reference speakers we got, we had 2 bookshelf speakers that we reviewed, and they're both really good examples of like both bookshelf speakers at their price points. And then we have our new reference speakers in, which are also excellent speakers, you know, for the money, if you could buy them, which you can't, unfortunately. But but they all like kind of multiply in price. They scale very nicely. And I thought I'd put together a slideshow presentation that showed just how much you get when you spend more for a loudspeaker, using 3 very, very good examples.
And it's important to recognize that these are not esoteric speakers. These are high performance within their respective price points. We're not looking at the extreme esoteric designs that are $100,000 for a bookshelf speaker. We're looking at something, all 3 of these speakers are very high value within their price categories.
Yeah, so like these are like all very good examples that we said. One is well, about $500, just a bit less than $500. The Heiko 300s, we had Aurora 300s, then the Focal Thiva number 1s, which we recently reviewed, and then the I guess you could call them the Sulk Sound 1802Gs. They aren't made anymore. Sulk doesn't have them available anymore. Sulk closed their doors, unfortunately. But if you could get them, they would be like probably $3,000 around that ballpark. So we have a $500 versus $1,000 versus maybe $3,000 speaker. All very good for the all high bang for the buck. Well, how do things scale? How do things improve at these respective price points is what we're going to look at.
And the third example with the Sulk Sound, even though they're not around anymore, the closest thing you can get now, I think, is Philharmonic by Dennis Murphy, right? So if you wanted something like that, you would look towards that brand.
Sure. I mean, they have the same design philosophy for sure. That's where I would look for sure. Yeah. So like we just said, with 3 good 2-way bookshelf speakers in house at different price points, we decided to look at what you get when you up your budget. And the speakers, as you said, unfortunately, we reviewed the Heiko Aurora 300s recently, and right after we reviewed them, they don't seem to be available anymore.
I think they might be in stock again. You know what? We do have affiliate links below. So if you want to buy at least the Heikos or the Focals, we have a link for audio advice for the Heikos. We have a link for Dream Media AV for the Focals. And as for the LS 1802Gs, you're just going to have to take our word on it because they don't make them anymore. But you'll see in James Larson's measurements that these are phenomenal speakers.
They never really made them, but there are speakers of like a corresponding like level of fidelity and build quality.
The value of your samples are going to go up in price since you can't get them anymore.
Yeah, they are. You could never get them because they're a custom-made pair. But anyways, so here's the Aurora Heiko.
It's one to show people the speakers that you have right now.
Oh yeah, there's the example of the 1802Gs. Those are custom made by Sulk Sound and Dennis Murphy. Dennis Murphy kind of put that new design together and made a custom crossover for it. So it's not like the one that you could have gotten from Salk Sound, which were different speakers. Those are the 1801s. These are the
Right.
1802Gs. They're custom, one of a kind, really cool. And we'll get a good look at them a little bit later. But to start with, on the low end of the bookshelf speakers we're looking at is the Hago Aurora 300s, which were $419 a pair last. They were available. They might be available again. Well, I'll have to check. Really, really good speakers for the money. Like phenomenal bookshelf speakers for the money. Just unexpectedly good build quality. The sound quality is really good. And we'll get a better look at the measurements.
Good sensitivity too for a bookshelf at 90 dB. That's pretty darn good.
Yeah, we ran a review of these. We also have a YouTube video review of these, and I guess for people who want a more in-depth look at these, they can go to those sources. But there's the measurements for them. Very good for the money. Not perfect, but for $400 passive bookshelf speakers that look good, built well, that's really darn good. Especially the red curve there, which is the listening window curve, which is the most important curve of any of these, and it's like from 1 kilohertz to like 10 kilohertz. It's like really flat. It's beautiful, right? I mean, it's really beautiful.
And what that means is you could EQ the speaker if you want, and it'll consistently sound better if you do that.
Yeah, it'll maintain the same like tonal consistency over a broad area. So like, it's just it sounds good over a wide listening, area, and it's a mark of a good loudspeaker design. So yeah, you can go to the next slide. There's the in-room measurement of these, and that's really darn good. There are some, like, it's not perfect, but like for the money, it's very good. We see a little bit of a rise in the mid-range, but it's mostly following very good curves. There's a little bit of a bump there around 700 hertz. I think that's just the way one of the ports is playing with one of the speakers in my room. But some little eccentricities, but they sound really good.
So is this left versus right at the main listening position?
Yeah, left versus right, and these are both averaged from 5 different points of 5 different responses. So this is not just a single measurement for each speaker.
The little bit extra high frequency roll off on that green trace, is that mic position differences relative to each speaker? Because I mean, they should track better than that above 10K.
It might be something acoustic, but yeah,
in the room.
Yeah, it might be something acoustic. It might be a mic position. I couldn't say, but these curves are more alike than unalike. So like, going on to the Focals, we reviewed these very recently. Very good speakers for the money. Nice. They look nice. They're better built than obviously because they're quite a bit more expensive. And I think they have a bit higher performance than the Hakos.
In fact, this review that you did inspired me to revamp. We have a budget 2-channel system that we're going to be posting about probably next week, but it's a 2-channel system with an upgrade path to Atmos, and it centers on using these speakers and adding a subwoofer. So I think this would make a really good 2-channel system for someone who has a mid-budget, but also wants to plug it into their TV with a AVR that has HDMI, and then eventually maybe upgrade to having Dolby Atmos or at least 5.1 in a room. I think this is a good starting point.
Yeah, I mean, you can't go wrong with these speakers for sure. There's just nothing really wrong with them. Look at that beautifully flat response, especially again the listening window. I mean, it's a bit better than the Hakos. It shares a few almost acoustic anomalies that the Hakos do, but really it's a flatter, smoother response. Everything is a little bit better controlled here. There's better directivity matching between the drivers, so there's a better blend between the woofer and the tweeter at the crossover frequency. I mean, it's a really good speaker for the money. You do get more when you spend more. In this case, that's not always true in audio, as you well know, Gene.
Sure.
Sometimes you could spend a lot more and get a lot less, but these are both really well conceived and engineered.
So there's a slight rise in treble, but as you get older, that might be something that people would prefer. I think I probably would like a little rise in treble like that. It's not crazy excessive. Maybe you don't want to tow the speaker in as much with a speaker that has that kind of performance. Yeah,
I mean, it depends on how sensitive you are to like high treble. I think you and I, Gene, we not really. That would be probably a good thing, or we would hear some high frequencies, whereas we might not if it were like lessened at the frequencies above 10 kilohertz.
Yeah.
And if you didn't want that, well, you could just angle the speaker. Just don't have the speakers facing right at you, because like
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All these dome tweeters, they beam at these high frequencies, especially at 10 kilohertz, above 10 kilohertz. So just angle the speaker away from you, and it'll like really diminish. There's the
See, that's a better in-room tracking response between the two speakers that I see here.
It is. I mean, they're better speakers. I don't want to like, talk down on the Heikos, which are excellent speakers, but
Yeah.
these, I mean, they have a better response. There's a better directivity matching. It's a smoother, just a smoother speaker overall, and you can see that in the in-room measurements here. And yeah, and also these might not have been pointing straight at my listening position. So
they definitely aren't, because they are a little bit rolled off, considering the measurements had a bit of an elevated treble response.
Yeah, and like I probably had them positioned to to a point where I thought they sounded best, and like maybe I that's just how I had them, and they sound really good. The in-room curves are good, the anechoic curves are good, and they sound great. And as anyone can see if they read my review, or if they just give them a demo for themselves. So
yep.
And now here's
these are your reference speaker now, even though they're not made anymore. I wanted you to have a control monitor. I don't know if you want to call it a monitor or not, but I wanted you to have a reference speaker that is tonally neutral, that has good output and isn't huge, something that was manageable for you to move around when you want to.
Yeah, to give it just a little bit of backstory for these, we were looking for a reference speaker for me as a loudspeaker reviewer. We wanted, like, Gene had the idea, like, well, you should have like a speaker that you can compare all other speakers to. I had some good speakers, but nothing that was like, flawless. And like, so we reached out to a few people, and Dennis Murphy, our friend at Philharmonic Audio, Dennis Murphy, a great, speaker designer, excellent speakers from, anything he's touched has been really good. He responded. He said, "Yeah, well, I can get you something." And like, we went back and forth, and there's this cool design. He wanted to play around with the graphene drivers for the LS 1801s that he designed for Salk Sound, and so we decided to make a custom version of those that had graphene drivers instead of the old drivers. I think were aluminum, maybe aluminum. I can't exactly remember, but they're higher performing woofers than what you had in the old LS 1801s, and he had to rework the crossover circuit, and the cabinets are a bit different. So these are like the super LS 1801s. So we just called them the 1802Gs, and really, really well built. I mean, LS 1801s, when Salk had them available, were like around 2,300 to 2,400. These would be more expensive, but Salk probably underpriced them. Salk underpriced them. And if a major loudspeaker manufacturer had speakers like this, of this build quality,
$5-6 grand a pair.
Yes, it would be much more expensive than what Salk had. So but Salk kind of built to order, right? So if you mass produce these, they'd be really expensive. Maybe
it's interesting they went with a 3/4 inch instead of a 1-inch dome, so that I guess causes less beaming, and they're able to play that mid-range up higher in frequency because of the phase plug. So I think they did a bunch of neat things in the speaker to get the kind of measurements and the way they match the drivers together, and we'll see that in the next slide, right?
Yeah, I mean, as a slightly smaller dome diameter will get you like a wider dispersion out to higher frequencies,
right?
For sure, yeah.
Well, let's
so you can go to the next slide.
Wow, that's
okay. Magnificently flat response.
Yeah.
Like the only like little like error you might see on the on-axis and listening window occurs at like around 700 hertz. That was that was the first iteration of the speaker. The port had a little resonance. When we exchanged the port for a port that didn't, that we just by changing the port length. And so the versions that I have now don't have that. So they're just perfectly flat from top to bottom, just beautifully. Like both the listening window and on-axis response. So like that's not even there. So the versions that you see behind me are even better than that, right? And that's darn near perfect for the on-axis and listening window, which means they'll have a very, very accurate sound over a very wide area. Is basically what those graphs are telling, those curves are telling you in that graph. So like, yeah, excellent speaker. Unfortunately, you can't really get one. I guess maybe if you want something comparably good, just go to Philharmonic's website, Dennis Murphy's company. But there are other companies that can get you this kind of performance, but of course it costs a lot more.
Yeah. That's an incredible tracking response from the left and right speakers that you have there.
Yeah, so a good speaker, you spend more, you get a better performance, and you get like nearly perfect in-room response. This is excellent, of course. And
that, that's been my experience as well when I measure speakers in room. The very best speakers like the Perlis and S7Ts in my room, it's almost like an active speaker. I mean, the matching is so good from left to right speaker at the listening position. We're talking 15 feet away above the room transition frequency of a couple of hundred hertz. They're like right on. I get that kind of performance with my active speakers in my theater room. But it's very difficult to get a passive speaker to perform like that. So looking at something like this, you can tell this thing is meticulously engineered. It probably uses very high tolerance parts. So there's good matching in the crossovers. The drivers are really high quality. That's the other thing too. When you spend little on speakers, it's hard to maintain high quality control of the drivers, and the drivers won't measure consistently from sample to sample. And that's why a lot of manufacturers sometimes make their own drivers to have better quality control of the performance.
Yeah, I mean, things improve all over. So yeah, these are excellent. I mean, the drivers and the crossover components are all would be way more expensive than what you'd find in the Heikos or even the Focal speakers. But like, this is what you get. You get, when you're getting like high value brands, you're getting a lot more for your money, and you get this sort of sound. And this does translate into a very good sound. These speakers sound excellent. I mean, I kind of wish I could do a review on them, but since they're the only ones in the world, what's the point, right? They're just so good. They sound great.
Guys, the reason why it's important to have matching like this, left and right speakers, is it greatly enhances the imaging properties of the speakers. If you could get your speakers to track well, the left versus right speaker at the listening position, that's when you get that really strong phantom center. And then if you have good dispersion characteristics and you have symmetric walls, you'll get that nice wide sound stage. It sounds like you're listening to multi-channel with a focus center from just two speakers. That's the magic of good two-channel on a really good system and good room acoustics and good speakers and good electronics.
Yeah, I want to just emphasize to have them like symmetric with the walls. Like if you have like one closer to a wall or further to the wall, it messes up the imaging a bit. So you really want them. I mean, you can still get good imaging, but it's best when like they're properly placed, with like equal distance from the walls. But yeah, that's another subject. Sorry for the digression. You can go to the next slide. So yeah. So anyways, so I know these speakers, right? I mean, I reviewed them and measured them.
Mm-hmm.
I listened to them a lot, right? So like, I couldn't really properly, do a comparison myself. I could tell you how they kind of sound, but I'm so biased by my own experiences and by what I know about these speakers. Well, how do they sound from people who don't know anything about them, so they aren't biased for or against any of these speakers? They don't know anything about them, right? So I had some family come over, and I played clips of some tracks for them as quickly as I could. I switched between speakers, and we just played like maybe a minute from each track, so like the oral memory of each like participant wouldn't be too badly degraded, right? I tried to go as fast as I could because you really need that fast AV switching to like properly compare what the last thing you heard it sounded like against the.
Did you level match when you compared them?
Yes, as much as I could. It probably wasn't perfect. This is an informal, like the title says. This is an informal comparison. So like,
I like that you included Sicilian pizza too. I mean, that makes it that much better.
Well, I had to like bribe these people somehow. Like, who wants to do this, right? No other person wants to spend their Friday night just listening to different speakers, right? So Sicilian style pans is great. This is a good pizza. We just switched between those, and for participants, and this is what people said about the Heikos versus the Thivas, is that the Thivas had more depth. I guess one person said that the 300s had more clarity, but somebody else said the Thivas were more clear. I mean, one person said that 300s had more clarity, but another person said that the speakers were more clear and less bright. So like, this kind of goes to show you that, people, they they might perceive the speakers differently, or they might not be able to describe what they hear as well as, say, a diehard audio enthusiast like you or me. So like, one participant said that they were close on content that wasn't bass heavy, but here's the thing: the Heiko Auroras actually had deeper bass extension than the Thivas, and that made a difference. That did make a difference. But one said, I think the Thivas sounded more open, and which I would attribute more maybe to its wider dispersion. I don't know. Maybe these were the comments that I wrote down from our participants said. But for as far as the Heiko Aurora 300s versus the 1802Gs, that the Heikos had sharper highs but were less clear. So there might be a rise in the treble on the Heikos versus the 1802Gs, which are like perfect treble, have less depth, which probably was because the 1802Gs would have had deeper bass extension. I would attribute that. I'm just guessing. I don't know for sure, right? And lower bass, which, of course, goes back to the lower bass extension. So these are just a few notes that I took. They kind of sum up a lot of comments that these participants said. This is a summation, not like, really, really excruciating detail. So like, for the Thivas versus the 1802Gs, the 1802Gs had more depth in the soundstage, but I guess not quite bass extension, although the 1802Gs did dig deeper, and both measurably and anechoically and in room. 1802Gs lower bass level. The placement would have made a difference here. Of course, I should say that you could get deeper bass from a speaker that might not have as low as bass extension just by manipulating placement, right? So I'm not sure how much that was a factor.
Well, one person said the 18OGs had less bass, and then the other person said they had more bass.
Yeah, and I think,
was it maybe where they were sitting?
Everybody sat in the same spot. I had people coming in from the same spot. And people hear whatever they hear. I can't. I didn't try to guide anybody. I didn't say, do you think this might have sounded like that or this, right? I didn't try to guide people's perceptions at all, because I didn't want to try to put my thumbs on the scales, right? Because I was trying to get away from myself and having other people listen to these.
Well, one problem when you do listening to comparisons, especially if they're not blind, is you could get biased just by looking at the speaker. If you think one's prettier than the other, you might be influenced by that. But also, even during blind tests, and I've been through this because I used to run blind tests like in 2009, 2010, we used to do these shootouts. You get overwhelmed when you're comparing for more than about 20 or 30 minutes. It just becomes all numb. Like, listen to this. It's like when you go to an eye doctor and they're trying to figure out, do you prefer number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4? And then they keep going back and forth. At the end of that exam, I'm just like, I don't know, just get me off this chair, because I'm overwhelmed with the minute comparison differences. So I really think it's important to spend extended listening sessions with each speaker, because I've noticed upon initial listening of speakers, I would gravitate towards the one that has more brightness and more bass. But then over time, it wears on you if it's not neutral, especially in the treble. Like initially, some of the clip speakers might sound impressive in a showroom, but that throaty kind of sound in the horn that could be really forward biased on many of their models would be grating to me over a long listening session. Not on all their speakers, but on a lot of their speakers.
Yeah, I think that mostly describes their older speakers. Their newer ones, like reference premieres. We've done a couple reviews on their reference premieres, and they had a pretty flat response. They defied their reputation about being neutral. But anyways, yeah, cited. It makes a difference, sure. Like I said, that would have made this a lot more complicated to do, right? And a lot more work, and also. Yeah, and I couldn't spend these people's entire day doing this, right? So this is.
You got to give them more pizza, James.
I don't know how much more pizza they can handle. Anyways, yeah. Overall trends in listening impressions. 1801Gs had deeper bass, but less bass output. I think maybe that had to do with placement, where the other speakers were closer to the corners, and so the bass was more elevated, although it didn't dig as deep. But participants felt 300s and Thivas could be very similar at times, and some some people and a lot of like these comparisons I remember couldn't tell the difference. They weren't sure that I wasn't just replaying the same like speaker that I had just given them, right? So like, and there were cases where the 300 and the Thivas were very similar. Some thought the 300 offered more treble clarity than the Thivas, and others thought the opposite. Well, make of that what you will. That's just a personal, subjective thing. I'm not going to say one is right or the other is wrong. It's just what people felt. That was their impression. But I think most of the participants felt that the 1802Gs did have an edge in clarity and realism. And I wasn't trying to like influence that at all. I was trying to take myself out of it as much as possible. If shopping on a tight budget, all participants would settle for the 300. So like, I think everybody thought all the speakers sounded good, but do you really want to spend a lot more for speakers? And most people don't place that much of they don't give like audio that much weight, right? As much weight as you or I. Everybody wants a nice sound system, but not everybody wants to spend a fortune on
and that's important because the people you use were just casual listeners. They weren't like really into audio, right? So if you get a trained listener or you get someone that's an audiophile that just loves high quality sound, obviously the experience, this outcome would have probably been a lot different.
I'm not so sure. Maybe. But then again, they would have been biased by just having decided by being like having decided. They would have been more biased by being able to see the speakers. But on a relaxed budget, one participant said they would make the jump to the 1802Gs. And by a relaxed budget, I mean if they had like a lot of money to spend on a sound system. One person said, yeah, I'd definitely buy them if I had the money. One person said they just couldn't bring themselves to spend over $1,000 for a pair, no matter what, right? So they didn't really think that 1802Gs, that premium was worth it. And another person said they might go with the 1802Gs if they had the money. So like that just, I guess, goes to show how much people value high quality sound. I think everybody does, but some people do more so than others, right? Not everybody wants to spend thousands of dollars on a sound system. For them, it's just not worth it. And that's fine. I'm not going to say that's wrong. I would say we're the crazy ones, right? Who would actually spend thousands on a sound system? That's crazy, right? But that's what we are. I guess that's audiophilia or whatever. That's our own
Audioholics.
Audioholism. Audioholicism. Whatever. Okay. Anyways, so here is my own. Like, you have to take this with a huge grain of salt. Because like I know how these speakers sound. I would have been heavily biased just by looking at the measurements, just by seeing how the speakers are built. But in my opinion, the Thivas do offer a bit more clarity and treble versus I think that the tweeter and the Thivas it's a higher fidelity tweeter than the 300s. But of course it's a lot more expensive, And who knows if that might be my own bias. I don't know. Take it for what it's worth. And also, I found that there was a little bit of glare in the 300s treble region. There was like a sound that was kind of always there if you knew what to listen for. That the Thivas and 1802s just didn't have. It wasn't a big deal. It was very small, but there was a sound that was kind of always there if there was like sound in whatever content you were listening to. It was hitting that sound, right? It's kind of accentuated a little sound there. It was like a glare or something. I don't know what you call it. It wasn't bad. If you listen to it on its own, you wouldn't even notice it. It's only noticeable if you were putting these speakers right up against higher fidelity speakers, better speakers really. The 300s had deeper bass extension than the Thivas, and that's actually a big deal. I mean,
if you're not using a sub, especially.
Yeah, I would almost say if you're not using a sub, the 300s are worth it. I would stick with the 300 over the Thivas because it's such a big deal. Just a bit deeper bass extension. The 1802Gs, in my opinion, were just clearer and more articulate in any frequency band, right? Bass, mid, treble, anywhere, right? It just sounded better. They presented a more lucid and lifelike soundstage. And like I said, the jump from the 300s to the Thivas, I think it's not a huge jump. There's definitely a uptick in sound quality to me, but it's not like a massive jump. You're doubling the cost, but you're not. Are you really doubling the sound quality? In my opinion, no. But I would make that. I would spend the money to get it, but I'm crazy. You know, I want good sound. Like I said, the 300 definitely have an edge in bass, especially extension. But like once you hear the 1802Gs and you compare them against these the Thivas and the 300s, like, you know, you would want to make that jump.
It's a different class of sound when you get to that level, you know.
Yeah, it's not to like talk smack on the 300 of Thivas, but geez, those 1802, those are just perfect, right? Darn near perfect. And like, they're all good though. I mean, I enjoyed all of them a lot. So like, they're just, is it worth it to spend a lot more money? That's a subjective. That's
like that in any hobby, man. You can say that about cars, performance cars, fishing boats. I mean, it's just, if you're that passionate about something and you have the wallet for it, yeah, then it's worth it. But if you're a casual listener or you're tight on a budget, that's why we have all these options. That's why Audioholics covers all price ranges from entry level to the uber expensive.
Yeah, I would spend it, and I think most people would know that, or realize the 1802Gs are like, they are definitely a step up against the other two. But how much of it, how much of a step up, and how much of a value is it? How much is it worth it to go to that next level? That's for every individual to determine for themselves. Yeah. So like,
yeah.
In conclusion, there's definite benefits to spending more, but that's an individual call. But there's just more, like this slide says, there's just more than sound quality. There's build quality, and that counts for something. You like the look and feel of something that's high end, like
pride of ownership.
The Divas and the 300s, they're good speakers and they're built well for their cost, but you could tell by lifting them up and just by handling them, they're not like super. These speakers are like, they weigh as much as like a pair of those other speakers, right? These are like, I don't know, 30 pounds, something like 25, 30 pounds each, right? And so like, it's a higher end speaker. So there's other things too, like how its speaker looks, how it feels. And those also have to be like, that's your own call. That's so subjective. Is it worth it to you? Does that matter to you? I kind of like it. It's not the biggest thing for me, but like sound performance is the biggest thing for me, or so I'd like to think. But like, why not have something that like looks and feels like high end, right? A luxury product. And so,
look, I'm going to do a separate video on this topic because I do think the visual plays a huge part in how you enjoy audio. You want things to look nice. You want your room to be tidy. You want the lighting in your room to be good or very low dim. You just want a good atmosphere. You want to have pride of ownership in what you own. It enhances the audio experience. There's no doubt about that. I've been doing this for 25 years. And I can tell you, when something looks really good in a room, and if it measures good and the quality is good, having that nice aesthetic just takes that to the next level because it becomes a tactile experience with the audio gear that you just get a extra level of enjoyment from. Yeah.
The way things look, it's going to affect the way things sound. Whatever, that's the science. That's not me saying that. And there's been, a lot of research that has shown that like, if something looks nicer, you're going to like, project a better sonic experience to it. You can't help it, right? So
we're like, visual creatures.
Yeah, a visual, like our visual system takes like primacy over our auditory system. So like it instills a bias over what you hear. You can't get away from. And like so like make your system look good. It might sound better for it, even if it's just your mind playing tricks on you, sure, but it's still a perceivable quantity nonetheless, so yeah.
Awesome. Well, James, I appreciate you putting this together for us. This was just an informal comparison for you guys to consider. If you liked the video, please hit the thumb up, hit subscribe. I think that's a wrap. And until next time, my friends, keep listening.